It is time that you understood the legal fraud which was used in order to convict me. And what I mean by that is the completely fraudulent prosecutorial mechanism which they hid from the public. If you're already a lawyer, you're going to easily see this as I outline it. If you're not a lawyer and you're just an ordinary person, you'll need to listen to this, and this time you can watch this call video, maybe more than once. But if you're less than ordinary, like some sort of a half brain, such as a reporter, then you're too stupid to understand any of it, so you may as well just give up. It's too late for you. Now, with this call, I don't mean the fraudulent tactics like President Obama's SAM order, as signed by Attorney General Eric Holder, which imprisoned me without any contact or communication with any human being, including my attorney of record, by the way. That alone is an unconstitutional fraud, but
This call is from a federal prison.
It's not what this call's about. Nor am I talking about the Alford plea, a special kind of plea conviction where I denied every single one of their phony accusations, which, by the way, kept changing. A plea that they forced me to sign by threatening to indict my wife at the January 2014 grand jury. You know, if you don't finally sign a plea agreement, we're going to indict your wife. What husband of any worth is going to allow his wife to go through a year of mudslinging prosecution? That, too, is an obscenely unconstitutional fraud, but that's not what this call is about. Nor am I talking about the myriad of false, contrived other accusations, the ones concocted up as entrapment schemes by FBI Special Agent in Charge, Stephen Thomason. The same Special Agent in Charge who got fired from my case for coming up with these phony charges. They all failed or were dropped or never even indicted for them. Not that the press cares, because they still reported it, including the fake scheme that reporters still seem to report to this day about a copycat mailing. It never happened, and it wasn't going anywhere. That's why they had to drop it. It was fake. His malfeasance in my case is why he is an ex-FBI agent. And there's no more. There's going to be more big news about that soon. If I was him or Quokka, they better have good lawyers because they're about to need them. But that's not even the fraud that I'm talking about. That's the fraud I'm talking about here is the fraud of the courtroom, the legal fraud. It's a huge deal, and they hid it from you for a decade, and no reporter bothered asking a single question about it because they're stupid. Now you'll get to see it. So here we go, and I want you to follow along with me. You should be seeing exhibits too. 18 USC 229 is the statute, the law, which enforces the Chemical Weapons Treaty. That's known as the Chemical Weapons Convention, as ratified by a couple of hundred nations, by the way, including what was specifically alleged in my case, the chemical weapon of targeted assassination called ricin. Well, what sort of things by law, that's what matters here, by law, are considered a chemical weapon? That answer can be found at 18 USC 229F. At section B and 8B, it actually tells you, it says, such identifications are explicitly listed in the Annex of Chemicals of the Treaty, which is the Chemical Weapons Convention. Well, okay, where do we find that listing, that annex in law? Is ricin explicitly by law, therefore defined on that list? Answer, why, yes it is. The CWCIA statute does exactly that, as passed by Congress and signed by the President. And by the way, that's how laws are made. Hat Tip Schoolhouse Rock, if you remember that. That makes it the law, which a judge is supposed to follow. A judge is supposed to enforce. Supposed to. Now, 22 USC, subsection 6701 as sequence, section 10 explicitly, specifically, and legally defines that very list, which judges, including Judge Acob, are expected to follow. And there is absolutely no ambiguity here, none, because under that section 10 list, the annex, item H, as you can see, is ricin. president, i.e. the folks who make the laws that the courts, the judges, are expected to follow. Ricin, by law, is defined as a chemical weapon, which must, I use the word must here, because that's what it
This call is from a federal prison.
must be enforced by 18 U.S.C. 229, chemical weapons statute. But in this case, there happen to be judges out there like Aycock who view following the law as an elective, or who just outright refuse to do their actual job of actually following the actual law as it is actually written by the actual people who actually wrote the thing. It is also listed elsewhere. So just to be sure that someone like Aycock couldn't just come along and just make shit up in order to refuse to follow the written law. For example, 22 CFR, subsection 712, lists those chemicals. Well, hey, there's the annex. And wait, what's that at number 8? Why, that's ricin, listed as a Schedule 1 chemical weapon. Oh, gosh. But that's not all. Take a look at 22 CFR, subsection 745, supplement number 1. Oh, look, it's the same list. On that list is what? Number 8? Ricin. Those lists are identical, the regulatory lists, precisely the same, and, by the way, in English, matches precisely the statutory list, which matches precisely the treaty list. It's amazing. There's no fucking way anyone can miss that. It is duplicated multiple times. There's absolutely no ambiguity here, none. So anyone who is so daft that they cannot understand the clear meaning and the multiple signs just laid out by everybody who matters, such a daft person shouldn't be holding a badge or a gavel. They should be playing with blocks on the floor, hopefully in a carpeted room. It's very clear that someone who does not understand that ricin is legally designated as a chemical weapon is someone who simply doesn't want it to be, which means someone who has an agenda. They cannot read, the law and stuff, or they don't believe in enforcing the law. And that means sinister, nefarious intent. That means evil, wrongdoing. That means fraud. Either way, one would think that a judge whose, job it is, people think involves the law, should, know the actual law and follow it. At least that's what I thought. Silly me. Now, maybe you're one of the ones who say, well, Mr. Dutschke, a chemical weapon, biological weapon, whatever, who cares? It's all the same, right? I mean, I'm sure they're completely different enforcement statutes of completely different treaties, but why not just let the judge, the prosecutor, the FBI, just pick one and decide what they want a statute to mean? I mean, after all, why do we need Congress or a president for anyway? Just let the FBI run anything. They do such a good job and are never used as political tools. Yeah, right. Well, sorry there, fella. The Chemical Weapons Convention Implementation Act, which was passed by President and Congress, taking effect at 12:01 a.m. June 26 of 1999, which is found at 22 U.S.C. 6701. Section 9 is actually very, very specific when it comes to ricin, a Section 1 chemical, Schedule 1 chemical. That section actually mentions the FBI and 229 by name and explicitly directs the FBI, this is almost a direct quote here, the FBI to investigate chemical weapons violations under 18 U.S.C. 229. 18 U.S.C. 229. But that's not what they did in my case. Even though the law is explicit, as you can see now, and even though it gives the very exact instructions to the FBI, 229, that's not what they did. Now, to be fair, once upon a time she did, she just forgot. In fact, during one of the sentencing hearings, someone actually brought up the annex of chemical weapons, that is, that list, and pointed out, quoting, Ricin is one of the chemicals listed on the annex. That's a direct quote. Guess what? That person, one would think, would have been Dutschke's lawyer, my lawyer. But no, my lawyer was completely oblivious. He didn't know the law. That person, the one who publicly and on record mentioned that ricin was, in fact, on the list of chemicals for a completely different statute than the one I was charged with, which is 18 U.S.C. 175, not 229, was Sharon Aycock herself, the judge. No joke. Check the transcript. It's real. It's all there. So what happened? What was changed? What happened? Well, I filed my appeal, that's what. So in her briefing defending her fraud, she completely reversed her own statement. This is a matter of record. Pretending that she never even said it. That is an act of intentional disinformation. You know what that's called? Intentional disinformation? That's called lying. This is all part of the actual record. You can actually read it for yourself. That person, the one who publicly and on record mentioned that ricin was, in fact, on that list of chemicals for a completely different statute than the one that I was actually charged with, 175. That person was Sharon Aycock herself, the judge. No joke. Check the transcript. That's real. It is all there. So what happened? What changed? Well, I filed my appeal. That's what. And pointed all this out. That's what. So in her briefing defending her fraud, she completely reversed her own statement, pretending that she had never said that, which is an act of intentional disinformation, by the way. You know what that's called, intentional disinformation? That's called lying. This is all part of the actual record, so you can read it for yourself. The fraud was committed, and originally committed by the FBI, Special Agent in Charge, Thomason, who, by the way, I remind you, later got canned for his lies, and the special prosecutor from the National Security Division. I wasn't prosecuted by the Criminal Division. I was prosecuted by the NSD, and U.S. Attorney Chad Lamar. This all happened on the order of the U.S. Attorney General, Eric Holder, because President Obama told him, quote, make an example out of him, meaning me, and use the right people means use the crooked cops like Thomason and his little sidekick Quokka. So the fraud did, in fact, occur. That's not even debatable. You can't even debate that. It's all a matter of the record now. And then they defended it after the fact. It was part of their crime. A crime did occur in 2013, but it's not the one that you think. They committed the crime. It was their scheme. Aycock was an unwitting accomplice at worst, but likely, I'd say, a conspirator. So when the Kings of Tupelo series director, McLean Way, when he asked Thomason, whose idea was it to charge Dutschke with the wrong statute? When he asked Thomason that, former FBI agent Thomason, he passed the buck, and he said that it was the prosecutor's scheme. But when McLean Way then asked the eye-rolling prosecutor Clay Joyner, he passed the buck, and he said it came from Maine DOJ. And he added that he felt confident that it would hold up to scrutiny, which really just simply means that Aycock would go along with the scheme. So, still, as you can see, shit rolls downhill. Even if it was Holder's scheme, and it really wasn't, because the basis of all of this, it all came from Brennan. Still, the first document, the first part of the fraud, was Thomason, who swore to it. Thomason swore an arrest affidavit. Thomason's fraud, then, to Judge Susan Alexander at the time, who has yet to hold him in contempt, by the way. Here's the bottom line. I cannot be guilty of developing a biological weapon, as my sentence and conviction says, because no biological weapon was ever alleged. They alleged ricin, which uses a completely different statute, a chemical weapon. And they did so for a reason. This obviously leads to the next main question. Why? Why did they do this? What was it about this case which caused them to rely on committing that indictment fraud? Why did they need this illegal, dirty scheme? In other words, why use 175 instead of 229, which is the correct statute for ricin allegation?
Why did they pull the switcheroo fraud to which ACOC co-signed? Well, that is for another call. That's the one about the facts and the lab work. And I will get to that. Boy, that's going to blow your mind for sure. But for now, you see this with your own eyes. You see the fraud with your own eyes. Till the next call, that's my 3 chords and the truth.